I thought I had left my past behind, but a shocking reading forced me to face truths I wasn't ready for. Little did I know this was just the beginning. Welcome to today's story. Before we dive in, are you new here or have you returned to enjoy more of these stories? I'm working hard to reach 1,000 subscribers and your support means the world to me. Today's story revolves around a woman named Julia who, after years of distance from her family, is called back to confront a painful past she thought she had left behind. It's a tale about forgiveness, closure, and the unexpected ways the past can resurface when you least expect it. Have you ever found yourself forced to confront something you thought was long buried? Stay tuned until the end to find out how Julia navigates this emotional journey and what choices she makes to reclaim her future. It was a typical rainy morning in New York City. I had just finished my cup of coffee, the steam rising like the fog that clung to the skyscrapers. I hadn't heard from my family in years. No phone calls, no messages, not even a simple happy birthday. Nothing. So, when the letter came, its sleek, official appearance was as unexpected as it was chilling. My hands trembled as I tore open the envelope. It was an invitation to the reading of my estranged father's will. The man I hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade. The man who had abandoned me when I needed him the most. Why now? Why after all these years? Why do you even bother? I muttered to myself. But then I glanced at my son, Eli, playing with his toys on the floor. He looked up at me with those wise, innocent eyes, and for the first time in years, something inside me stirred. Maybe it was the hope that I could finally get some closure. Or maybe it was the small, fragile hope that my father, even at the end of his life, might have left something behind for me. Eli's words echoed in my mind. "Mom, maybe we should go. Maybe there's something you need to hear." It didn't make sense, but somehow I couldn't shake the thought. So we went. The moment we entered the grand hall of the law office, I felt it. The coldness. The sharp, oppressive air that seemed to freeze the very space around me. The room was vast, with high ceilings and sleek, cold marble floors that echoed under every step we took. The polished wood of the table gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, casting long, unwelcoming shadows on the walls. The very architecture of the space felt designed to separate us, to remind us that we weren't here for anything other than business, that nothing familial would ever exist here again. My half-sister, Rachel, was seated at the head of the table, her posture straight as a rod. Her arms were crossed, an unconscious display of superiority, as though she were in complete control of everything in this room, everything and everyone. I could feel her eyes on me before I even entered the room, like a piercing beam that cut straight through the air, seeking me out. She was always the golden child, the one who never questioned authority, the one who followed all the rules. The one who stayed, and there she was, still the same, still perfect in her own mind. Her lips curled into a smile, but there was no warmth in it. It was calculated, cold, almost like she was enjoying the show. The show of me walking back into this family that had once discarded me. I could almost hear the unspoken words in her smile. "Look at her. She's back, but she doesn't belong. Look who decided to show up," Rachel sneered, her voice sharp, each word dripping with disdain. "Didn't think we'd see you again. After all, Dad made it pretty clear you weren't part of the family." The words were like a slap to the face, even though I'd been expecting them. It wasn't the first time I'd been reminded of my place in their world, but hearing it spoken aloud here in front of everyone. My son, the lawyer, the people who had been so quick to distance themselves from me, felt like a deep wound that hadn't fully healed. Her voice cut deeper than any knife, and though I felt the sting, I refused to let her see the hurt. I couldn't let her have that satisfaction. Not here. Not now. I squeezed Eli's hand tightly, hoping he wouldn't feel the weight of the tension in the air. His small fingers curled around mine, his touch warm, and for a fleeting moment, I found some comfort in it. His innocence was still intact, untouched by the bitterness that I had known all my life. As I looked down at him, I realized how much I owed him. He was the reason I had survived all those years of bitterness, the reason I had kept going despite it all. But Rachel wasn't done yet. She leaned back in her chair, her arms still crossed, a smug smile tugging at her lips. It wasn't enough that she had to remind me of my place in the family. No, she had to make sure that everyone knew just how little I mattered. Then came my uncle, Mark, my father's older brother, the man who had always been the embodiment of everything my father valued: power, control, success. His presence was like a shadow that loomed over me, the kind of shadow that always followed you even when you tried to escape it. He leaned back in his chair, one leg casually crossed over the other, his cigar dangling from his fingers as he exhaled a cloud of smoke, the air around him thick with it. He looked at me from the corner of his eye, a smug smirk spreading across his face. "Figures, she's here for the money," he muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Just like her mother, never satisfied. I could feel the weight of their judgment. Their eyes, their words, all of it. The way they saw me as the black sheep, the one who couldn't follow the rules, the one who had failed them. I had always been the one who never measured up, the one who didn't fit the mold. And now, here I was, the one they had cast aside. The one they had decided wasn't worth their time. The one they dismissed so easily. They saw me as a mistake, and I couldn't help but feel it all over again, as if everything I had built for myself, the life with Eli, the strength I had found, wasn't enough to keep their judgment at bay. What hurt even more was that no one even acknowledged Eli. He was just a kid to them, an invisible figure who didn't matter. They didn't even see him as my son. To them, he was just some child who happened to be there, a silent witness to a family drama he couldn't possibly understand. I wanted to leave. I wanted to get up, walk out of that room, and never look back. I wanted to escape from all of it. The coldness, the judgment, the feeling of being nothing more than an outsider in my own family. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not while Eli was still standing beside me, his hand gripped in mine, trusting me to lead him through this. And the thought of walking away from him, of showing him that this was what family was too much for me to bear. Eli wasn't afraid. He didn't understand everything, but he knew enough to see that something wasn't right here. He wasn't scared of them. I could see that now. While Rachel, Mark, and the others were focused on the power dynamics and the inheritance, Eli was focused on something else, on what was really important. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This was it. This was the moment where I had to choose, whether I let them push me into the corner, or whether I stood my ground, for Eli. For myself. I straightened up, holding Eli's hand even tighter. He looked up at me, his wide, innocent eyes searching mine for some sign, some reassurance that everything was going to be okay. And I gave him a smile, one that wasn't perfect, but one that was full of love. "We're not leaving," I whispered to him. "Not yet." The battle within me was fierce. The words Rachel and Mark had spoken, their judgment, their dismissal of me, was all so familiar. It wasn't the first time I had felt small in their presence. It wasn't the first time they had tried to erase me. But this time, something was different. I wasn't that lost girl anymore. I had a son to protect. I had a life to fight for, and I wasn't going to let them take that away from me. The next few moments felt like an eternity. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me, Rachel's smug gaze, Mark's indifferent stare. But through it all, I stood tall. Not just for me, but for Eli. He deserved to know that no matter what, I would always fight for him. And as I looked at my son, I realized that it was no longer about them. It was about us. As I sat there, barely holding it together, the weight of the moment pressing down on me, Mr. Connors walked in. His presence, as usual, was calm and professional, but today it felt different. He wasn't just the lawyer, he was a gatekeeper, the one who held the keys to the family's secrets, and I could feel the tension in the air the moment he stepped into the room. His tired eyes glanced around briefly before settling on his folder, the one that had all the answers I had been waiting for. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. He just opened the folder with his steady hands and began his work, as if this was another day at the office. But when he opened it, the room seemed to shrink, the air thickening with each movement he made. The silence before the reading felt so heavy that I thought I might suffocate in it. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly, like a cloud descending, dark and oppressive. "All right, Mr. Connors said, his voice steady but devoid of warmth. "Let's get this over with." His words were almost mechanical, as if he had done this 1,000 times before. But this time, I couldn't shake the sense that this moment, this reading, was about to alter the course of my life, forever. The will reading began with the usual formalities. Executors, heirs, assets, a long list of legal jargon that, for all intents and purposes, meant nothing to me. I could feel my attention slipping as the lawyer listed names and properties that had no connection to me. But I couldn't look away. My eyes remained fixed on him, as if the answers I sought were hidden somewhere in the stacks of paperwork. When Mr. Connors finally reached Rachel's name, the air in the room seemed to shift again. Rachel, sitting at the head of the table, was still. Her smile didn't flicker. It wasn't one of satisfaction, but of certainty. Rachel had always been the one to follow the rules, the one who had stayed and obeyed, the one who had never rebelled. Her inheritance was detailed first. The family estate, the trust funds, everything she was owed. I could hear her soft exhale, just loud enough for me to notice, as she leaned back in her chair. It was a small, satisfied gesture, like she was preparing to claim what was rightfully hers. I clenched my fists under the table, but I stayed silent. I had expected this, after all. She was the golden child, the one who had never left. Then came Mark, Dad's older brother. He had always been the shadow that loomed over me, casting doubt on my decisions and choices. He, too, had his portion: business shares, part of the family company, something I would never be a part of. And then, there were the distant relatives, the ones I hadn't seen in years, yet here they were, getting a piece of what was left behind. Even the vintage car collection was being divided up, as if it were some sort of treasure trove to be parceled out to people who hadn't even been a part of my life. It wasn't just the money, the assets, it was the recognition, the validation of their place in this family. And there I was, once again, ignored. There was no mention of me, no mention of my son, no mention of anything that could possibly link me to this family. Just silence. Thick, suffocating silence. I felt the walls closing in on me, the weight of exclusion heavy on my chest. The familiar sting of being erased began to resurface, sharp and cutting. My heart raced as the room continued to pass judgment on me, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. It was as if every ounce of hope I had once clung to, every tiny dream of reconciliation, some sign of acknowledgement, had just evaporated in the span of a few minutes. I was nobody, a ghost in my own family. But then, in that oppressive silence, something shifted. Eli, my son. He had been quiet, his small hand clasped in mine, but I could feel the subtle tension in his grip. He had sensed it, sensed the moment of truth arriving. And just as I thought I might crumble under the weight of the moment, Eli let go of my hand. I looked down at him in surprise as he stood up straight, his small figure moving with a quiet authority. He looked up at Mr. Connors, his eyes unyielding, his face filled with determination. "You forgot the video?" Eli said, his voice calm, unwavering, as though he had been waiting for this moment. The room froze. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't a hesitant request. His words rang out, clear and certain, and I could feel the collective breath of everyone in the room held in suspense. The lawyer paused, the sudden shift in the atmosphere palpable. The air grew heavier, thicker with tension. As all eyes in the room turned to Eli, I felt my heart skip a beat. My breath caught in my throat. "What video?" I asked, my voice a little shakier than I'd intended, a flood of confusion and dread creeping into my chest. But Eli didn't look at me. His eyes remained fixed on Mr. Connors. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't nervous. He was calm, too calm for a child his age. There was something in his gaze that made it impossible to doubt that he knew exactly what he was doing. He reached into his backpack, his movements deliberate, slow, like he was performing an important task. He pulled out a small, crumpled envelope. My heart skipped a beat as I saw the familiar handwriting on it. Sharp, precise, unmistakably my father's. "For the lawyer only, if it gets ugly." I didn't know what to think. This wasn't just an ordinary piece of paper. This wasn't just a letter or a note. It was something more, Something my father had left behind, something that was meant for me. And now Eli, my 10-year-old son, was holding the key to it. How? Why? I couldn't process it. Eli handed the envelope to Mr. Connors, and as the lawyer took it, I could feel my pulse racing. He didn't ask questions. He didn't hesitate. He simply took the envelope, his fingers brushing against it as if he already knew what was coming. He slowly opened it, the weight of the moment building with every second. Couldn't breathe. The tension in the room was suffocating. It wasn't just the family, the inheritance, or the judgment. It was the knowledge that something was about to change. Something that could finally answer the questions I had been carrying for years. Something that could force everyone to confront the truth. The truth about my father. The truth about me. This wasn't just a reading of a will. It was the beginning of something much larger, and I could feel the ground shifting beneath me. All eyes were on Mr. Connors as he took the USB drive from the envelope. The room was still. I was still. Everything that had happened before, every word, every judgment, suddenly seemed distant, because now, in that moment, the truth was about to come out, and nothing would ever be the same again. Knock, knock. Now you're about to watch the best part of the story, but before that, make sure to subscribe to my channel so we can keep going together. I watched, my heart pounding in my chest, as Eli handed the envelope to Mr. Connors. There was a long moment of hesitation, a brief pause where the lawyer seemed to weigh the significance of what was about to unfold. I could feel the eyes of the entire room on the small, crumpled piece of paper in Eli's hands, and as Mr. Connors took it, the tension became almost unbearable. His fingers, so practiced and sure, slid the envelope open with a deliberate slowness. The crackling sound of the paper, followed by the soft plop of a small object falling into his hand, filled the silence. I glanced down at the USB drive now in Mr. Connors's palm. A simple, black device, unassuming in its appearance but somehow heavy with the weight of its contents. There was no turning back now. My father had left us something hidden for years, something that might hold the truth, something that could change everything. Let's see what this is about, Mr. Connors finally said, his voice the only sound cutting through the thick tension in the room. He plugged the USB into his laptop with the calm professionalism of someone used to handling delicate matters. The screen flickered to life, and for a brief moment, I felt a tightening in my chest, an almost physical sensation of dread and anticipation. The whirring of the computer's fan filled the otherwise quiet room, adding to the heavy stillness that hung in the air. And then suddenly there he was, my father. I could feel my breath catch in my throat as the image of him appeared on the screen. He looked older, thinner, his face more lined than I remembered. But there was no mistaking him. Despite the passing years, despite the distance between us, it was unmistakably him, Tobias Hunter. The man who had been both my greatest source of pain and my deepest longing for acceptance. He sat in a dimly lit room, the shadows playing across his features, his hands clasped in front of him. His gaze was fixed directly into the camera, and there was something in his eyes, something raw and unspoken, that struck me. It wasn't the stern, commanding look I remembered from my childhood. It wasn't the coldness that had driven me away all those years ago. No, it was something else, something softer, something regretful. "Hello, Julia." My father's voice crackled through the speakers, the sound coming out thick and uneven, filled with weariness and regret. The words hung in the air like a burden, a confession long overdue. I could hear the strain in his voice, as though he had been carrying this apology for far too long. "If you're watching this, I know things didn't go well today, and I'm sorry for that. I never thought I'd be the one to apologize, but here we are." His words hit me like a wave, overwhelming in their weight. I had spent so many years convincing myself that my father had never cared, that he had abandoned me without a second thought, that his love was conditional, his expectations impossible to meet. And yet, here he was apologizing. For the first time in years, the walls I had built up around my heart began to crack. The room remained silent as my father continued, his voice steadying as he spoke from a place of deep regret. It was as if every word he spoke was carefully measured, as though he had rehearsed them countless times in his mind before they finally left his lips. "I know I hurt you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know I pushed you away when you needed me the most. I thought I was protecting you, but all I did was destroy what was left of our relationship. I was wrong. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I willed myself not to let them fall. For years, I had convinced myself that my father was incapable of change, that he would never acknowledge the hurt he caused me. But hearing him say those words, those simple, honest words, shattered the armor I had so carefully built around myself. I had always thought that I was the one who had been abandoned, the one who had been left behind. But now, listening to my father's words, I realized that he had been carrying the burden of guilt for so long. He had been the one to hurt me, yes, but he had also suffered in his own way. And for the first time, I felt the weight of his sorrow, not as a child seeking validation, but as a woman trying to understand the complexities of her father's mistakes. "I want you to know, Julia," my father's voice continued softer now, "that I've changed my will. Everything, the house, the business, it's all for you and Eli. You deserve it." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, everything in the room felt suspended. The sound of my father's voice, now mixed with the faint hum of the laptop, filled the space as I let the realization sink in. He had changed the will. He had done something that I never thought possible. He had made a decision that would right the wrongs of the past. "I hope this helps you find peace," my father continued, his voice faltering slightly. "I've failed you in many ways, but I won't let that be my legacy. I hope this video gives you some closure, if nothing else." The finality of his words settled over me like a heavy blanket. For years, I had waited for this moment when my father would finally acknowledge the pain he had caused me. And now that it was here, I didn't know what to do with it. I had spent so many years holding on to my anger, to my resentment, to the idea that I had been wronged. But now, in the silence that followed his final words, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something else, something closer to acceptance. My father had done what I had always hoped he would. He had admitted his wrongs. He had given me the acknowledgement I had spent so long yearning for. And now I had a choice. I could continue to hold on to the past, or I could begin to let go and move forward. But there was something else, something that hit me like a thunderbolt. The legacy he spoke of, the business, the house, the life he had built. It was all for me and Eli, for the family that I had always been a part of, even when I had felt like an outsider. And there, in that moment, I realized that the truth was more than just an apology. It was a new beginning. I wasn't just the daughter who had been abandoned. I wasn't just the woman who had been hurt. I was something more now. I was a part of something that could finally be rebuilt. My father had left me this, his final gift, his final attempt at redemption. The room remained silent, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Everyone in the room had been expecting the same thing from me, that I would be angry, that I would lash out. But instead, I was left in the quiet realization that, for the first time in my life, I didn't need to fight anymore. I didn't need to prove anything. The truth had been spoken, and now I could begin to heal. The video ended and the room was still. The silence felt unbearable, like it was suffocating every single one of us in the room. My eyes were fixed on the screen, still processing the words that had come from my father. Words I had waited a lifetime to hear. But now that they had been spoken, they didn't bring the relief I had expected. Instead, there was this heavy stillness, as though everyone around me had been frozen in time. Karen, Rachel's husband, and Mark sat there motionless. Their faces were pale, drained of all the arrogance and smugness they had worn so comfortably before the video started. They had expected nothing that could shake their world, nothing that could challenge the narrative they had created. And now they were left with the undeniable truth. My father, despite everything, had left us something I didn't expect, but desperately needed. The weight of that truth hung in the air like a cloud that couldn't move. They sat there, staring at the screen, unsure of how to react, unsure of how to face the reality that had been handed to them. For years, they had been living in a version of the world where I didn't matter, where I was erased, dismissed. But now, it was as if my father's final act had shattered their carefully constructed world, and they had no choice but to deal with it. I turned to Eli, my heart swelling with pride. There he was, my son, small in stature but immense in strength. He had done this. He had brought us here. While I had spent years drowning in bitterness, trying to make sense of the past, Eli had carried this secret, this message, all on his own. My son had been the one to bridge the gap between me and the past. It wasn't just the inheritance that had changed things. It was the message my father had left. It was the acknowledgement, the apology, the final piece of closure that I had so desperately needed. And Eli, in his quiet, unassuming way, had been the messenger, the truth-bearer. My chest tightened as I looked down at him. He was so calm, so composed, far beyond his years. It was as though he knew, deep down, that this moment was more than just about family wealth or material things. It was about healing. It was about bridging the rift that had kept me and my father apart for so long. And it was also about healing the rift between me and myself, the way I had blamed myself for so much, the way I had carried that weight without ever asking for help. Eli had helped me when I couldn't help myself. He had been the one to see past the bitterness, to see past the anger, and to hold on to the smallest thread of hope that this family, this fractured family, could still be whole again. As I stood up from my seat, Eli's hand still firmly in mine, I could feel a shift within me. It was subtle at first, like a quiet hum in the background of my thoughts. But as I walked out of the room, with him by my side, that hum grew louder. It became the beating of my heart, the realization that I was walking away from all of it. The past, the judgment, the brokenness, and stepping into something new. The silence in that room had been deafening, but it was a silence I could now embrace. It wasn't the silence of shame or regret, nor the suffocating kind that I had lived with for so long. This silence was different. It was the silence of truth, of forgiveness, and of finally being seen. For years, I had felt like an invisible woman, someone living on the margins of her own life, always looking in but never really part of the picture. But now, for the first time, I felt like I belonged. Not to my father's legacy, not to his business or his house, but to myself. I had reclaimed that, and I had Eli to thank for that. We walked through the long hallway, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the empty space. It wasn't just the physical distance we were walking away from, it was the emotional distance too. I wasn't leaving the building physically, but I was walking away from the idea that I needed their approval, their validation, to be whole. I had always tried so hard to fit into a mold that wasn't meant for me, to be something I wasn't just so I could be seen. But now I realized I didn't need their recognition. I had found my own. I looked down at Eli again, watching his small form beside me. He was so innocent, so full of life, yet he had just helped me make the biggest change of my life. He had given me back the one thing I thought I had lost forever, my peace. And as I squeezed his hand, I realized that I didn't need anything more than that. I didn't need any more material possessions, any more wealth. I didn't need my father's approval or my family's validation. All I needed was my son, my little boy, who had shown me what it meant to be strong, to forgive, and to let go. As we stepped outside into the late afternoon sunlight, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The world didn't feel as heavy anymore. The weight of the past had started to lift, and there, in the quiet of the moment, I found a deep sense of peace. It wasn't a perfect peace. It wasn't one that would fix everything or erase all the hurt, but it was a peace that felt real, a peace that came from within, from the knowledge that I had made it through the darkest parts of my life and had come out stronger. We walked down the steps of the building, the bright city lights beginning to flicker to life as the evening settled in. Eli skipped beside me, his energy infectious, and I couldn't help but smile. We were going forward now, together, and I had no idea what the future would hold, but I knew it was going to be different. It was going to be better. And as we walked away from that building, from the family that had never really seen me, I knew one thing for sure. I had found my voice. I had found my peace. And no matter what happened next, that was all that truly mattered. Now that you've heard the story, I'd love to know what you think. Feel free to leave your thoughts, feelings, or any feedback in the comments. If the story resonated with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next exciting chapter. Your support means everything to me, and I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen. Thank you for being part of this journey, and I can't wait to share the next story with you soon.